Hey folks, welcome to Build Fly Go. So I had a question this week about what am I doing for oxygen system in the airplane. You may have seen on a couple of flights that we used oxygen, probably because we were going up too high or also because I was flying at night. I also have a rule of thumb of 8,000 after dark, put on oxygen. But so let's take a quick peek at what my oxygen setup looks like in the RV-9. And, oh, that's washed out. And I'll also talk about what we're planning for the RV-10. So here are the basic components, right? So there's an oxygen cylinder. I believe this is an M2. It's just a regular oxygen cylinder. It's got a CGA 540 valve, which is sort of a more common valve for aviation oxygen. This isn't the most common valve out there. It's usually a valve used on very large cylinders of oxygen. So if you do get one of these, getting them filled might involve buying yourself an adapter, and you can get these adapters fairly easily. It's just that the usual shop doesn't have them. I'll come back to filling these later. Then you have a regulator. It's just a regulator that screws onto the top. There you go. And there's a little tube that goes from there to the sort of oxygen controller box that we have here. I use these Mountain High. This is the O2D2. This is actually an older version of the O2D2. The current one has a little rotary knob instead of these push buttons here. And what this does, so this is, you'll probably often see, instead of something like this in an airplane oxygen system, the regulator just has the tubes coming off to the cannulas, which is what goes by your nose to get you oxygen. So what this does is this is a demand-driven oxygen device. So it takes the oxygen from the tank to here, and then there's two little outputs, right? It's for the pilot and call it co-pilot. And what it does is when it senses you inhale, so there's a slight drop in pressure when you inhale, right? It then gives you a little burst of oxygen. And the Mountain High folks, I'm sure there's another manufacturer that makes this. The most common one is Mountain High that I'm aware of. They make a one-place as well as this two-place. And they've done all the math for different pressure altitudes and how much oxygen to give you. So you don't have to worry about that, right? So depending on how high you are, you're gonna get a bigger burst of oxygen or a smaller burst of oxygen. And these are all little quick disconnects, so you just push them down and they disconnect the tubing. Very nice setup. You will often find these pre-owned in the usual aviation forums and things like that. I bought this pre-owned and then I sent it to Mountain High for overhaul. I'm a big believer in life support systems, knowing when they were serviced last, right? So when I buy a life support system like this, I will, unless it comes with paperwork saying it just got overhauled by the factory and inspected, I will usually just ship it off to the factory immediately and say, I need this to be, inspected, serviced, overhauled. And they'll usually charge you like $100 to do that, right? It's not a big deal, and it's worth doing. Okay, so the other end of the system is a PostOx, which is a way for you to see what your bloodstream oxygen concentration, I think that's the right thing, is. This is a fairly inexpensive device. I bought this on Amazon. It's not really showing terribly well on the video, but I have it on my finger here, and hopefully in just a second there we go. So I'm at 97% oxygen saturation, and my BPM is currently 106 because I'm crawling around the inside of the airplane. It's an important part of using oxygen and flying pretty high, is you want to make sure that your numbers are good. If I dip below 90% at any point, I usually put on oxygen. I know that there are less conservative numbers out there and more conservative numbers out there. You need to do your research and figure out what works for you. Yes, definitely whenever you're flying high, you want to make sure to keep track of your oxygen. Okay, so please don't mind the mess. We were doing some preventative maintenance just recently. So this is where I mount the oxygen cylinder right here. So I put nut plates on the back of this panel. This panel is removable. And this nice hose clamp. And you'll notice there's a tube hanging there this goes to that regulator, and then a little loose, tighten this up a little bit, and then it sort of follows here, and I have that O2 decode velcroed. You'll see the velcro right there. Whoops. You'll see the velcro right there. It's velcroed in place, and then I put in one of the cannulas right now so you can see, and it just comes this way, and it goes over your shoulder and towards your nose. So pretty simple setup, very accessible, easy to maintain, right? No big deal. Let's take a look at what the cylinder looks like when it's over there. So there it is. So the cylinder just sits right there with attached by the hose clamp. You can see the gauge. So if you look over your shoulder, you can glance and look at the gauge. It's just connected to the hose, and the hose goes to there, and then there we go. And I mentioned these were quick disconnects, so you just push down, push down, and they just come up, and that's it. Easy peasy, really easy setup, works really well, and because it's the demand-driven setup, you get a ton of use out of a small cylinder like that. Take a peek at the chart, and you can see that it's really a lot better use than just a constant flow setup. I have a couple of different size cylinders that I use for different setups. Really, these cylinders just pop up every so often used, and I just pick them up because they're so cheap to buy used. The valve tends to be a bit pricey to get the valve that matches, but it's worth the trouble. All right, thanks everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Feel free to ask any other questions, and I'll try and cover them in a video. Have a great day.